Pick up a smooth stone from a riverbed and look at it closely. The rounded edges, the layered surface, the way light catches what looks like grain running through it. Most people see geology. A few people see something else entirely. Something that changes what you thought you knew about forests, rivers, time, and who decided what counts as natural history. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from, and don't forget to click subscribe. Go to any river with a rocky bed and reach in. Pull out one of the smooth, flat stones that have been sitting there since before anyone alive can remember. Hold it up. Look at the surface. In the right light, on the right specimen, you will see something that geologists have a technical explanation for, but that a trained woodworker would recognize immediately. You will see grain, not the random crystalline structure of granite or the uniform surface of sandstone. Grain, directional, parallel, organic grain of the kind that runs through wood. The technical explanation is that this is a coincidence of mineral deposition. That certain sedimentary and metamorphic rocks develop banding patterns that superficially resemble wood grain. That pareidolia, the human tendency to see familiar patterns in random surfaces, makes us perceive wood where there is only stone. That explanation is not wrong as far as it goes, but it does not go far enough. Because alongside the rocks that merely look like wood, there are objects in riverbeds that are not rock at all. Objects that are chemically, structurally, and materially wood, preserved in form but transformed in substance by processes that mainstream geology documents but whose scale it consistently underestimates. Ancient wood. Wood so old and so transformed by time and pressure and mineral replacement that it looks, feels, and weighs exactly like stone. And the story of how those objects got there and what they represent about the forest that produced them is a story that the standard account of natural history has never fully told. Petrified wood is not a mystery. It is a documented, well-understood geological process. Organic material, typically wood, becomes buried under sediment. Groundwater carrying dissolved minerals, most often silica, percolates through the buried wood. Over thousands to millions of years, the minerals replace the organic cellular structure of the wood molecule by molecule, preserving the shape, the grain, the ring structure, and sometimes even the cellular detail of the original material while replacing its chemistry entirely with stone. The result is an object that is geologically a rock, but morphologically a tree. It has the weight and hardness of stone. It has the visual structure of wood. And it can be found not just in famous fossil beds like the petrified forest in Arizona, but in riverbeds, in gravel pits, in construction excavations, and in agricultural fields across every continent on Earth. This is the part of the story that the standard account tells well. What it tells less well is the scale. The sheer quantity of petrified wood distributed across the surface of the planet is not consistent with the geological processes that are supposed to explain it. It is not consistent with the forest that supposedly produced it, and it is not consistent with the timeline that mainstream natural history assigns to the events that buried it. The revisionist question is not whether petrified wood exists. The revisionist question is what it tells us about what the Earth looked like before the events that produced it. And the answer to that question, when you follow the physical evidence rather than the institutional consensus, looks very different from what the textbooks describe. Here is a fact that is not disputed. The world's major petrified wood deposits are not distributed randomly across the landscape. They cluster. They occur in specific geological formations, in specific river systems, in specific regions that share a pattern of ancient catastrophic deposition. The petrified forest in Arizona contains logs up to 60 meters long, lying horizontally, stripped of their branches, sorted by size, and oriented in a consistent direction. The standard explanation is that these trees were carried by a river system, stripped of their branches in transport, sorted by water action, deposited in a floodplain, buried by volcanic ash, and then slowly petrified over 200 million years. This explanation accounts for the physical arrangement of the logs. What it does not account for is the volume. The petrified forest contains an estimated 1 billion tons of petrified wood, concentrated in an area of roughly 300 square miles. 1 billion tons. The living forest that supposedly produced this material would have required a growing region of extraordinary size, growing for an extraordinary length of time, producing an extraordinary density of biomass. The trees themselves are not small. The species reconstructed from the petrified specimens are gymnosperms, cone-bearing trees related to modern conifers, but the reconstructed dimensions are not consistent with modern conifers. These trees were significantly larger. Trunk diameters of 2 to 3 meters are common in the fossil record. Heights estimated from the log dimensions suggest trees reaching 60 to 90 meters, comparable to modern giant sequoias, but in a species that no longer exists anywhere on Earth. Why do trees of this scale no longer exist? The standard answer is evolutionary change, that the ecological conditions that supported these trees no longer prevail, that modern conifers represent an adaptation to different conditions. This is plausible, but it raises a secondary question that the standard account does not comfortably address. If the conditions that supported these forests no longer prevail, what changed, and when did the change happen? And was the change gradual, as evolutionary and geological orthodoxy prefers, or was it sudden? Those three questions matter because the answer to the third one determines everything else. A gradual change leaves a gradual record. Species adapt incrementally. The fossil record shows transitional forms. The sedimentary record shows slow accumulation. A sudden change leaves a different record entirely. It leaves mass burial events. It leaves sorted, stripped, directionally deposited organic material. It leaves exactly the pattern visible in every major petrified wood deposit on Earth. The distribution of petrified wood in riverbeds is not the result of the logs travelling from a single ancient forest to their current location. The physics of water transport do not support that scenario for the distances and quantities involved. What the distribution suggests instead is that the source material was distributed across an enormous area and was buried more or less simultaneously by an event of corresponding scale. The word simultaneously is doing a lot of work in that sentence and requires unpacking. In geological terms, simultaneously can mean anything from a single day to a period of 10,000 years. But the physical characteristics of the major petrified wood deposits suggest a narrower window than 10,000 years. The logs are sorted and oriented in ways consistent with high-energy water transport. They are stripped of branches and bark in ways consistent with violent mechanical action. They are buried under volcanic ash deposits that, in most locations, represent a single depositional event rather than gradual accumulation. This pattern is consistent with a hypothesis that mainstream geology has long resisted, but that a growing number of researchers in catastrophist geology have been developing since the mid-20th century. The hypothesis is that the major petrified wood deposits represent the remnants of forests that were destroyed by a single global catastrophic event, or a series of closely spaced events that involved massive flooding, volcanic activity, and rapid burial of organic material across continental scales. This is not a fringe idea in the sense of having no physical evidence. It is a minority position in an academic field that has institutional reasons to prefer uniformitarianism, the doctrine that geological change happens gradually through processes still operating today, over catastrophism, the doctrine that the geological record includes evidence of sudden, large-scale events for which no modern analogue exists. The institutional reasons are worth examining because they connect directly to the revisionist economic history framework that makes sense of why the standard account looks the way it does. The physical evidence in the riverbeds, the petrified logs sorted and stripped and buried in patterns consistent with catastrophic events, was not ignored because it was not there. It was interpreted away because the interpretive framework required it to be explained differently. Here is what the physical evidence in riverbeds actually shows when you look at it without the constraint of the uniformitarian framework. The smooth, rounded objects that look like stones in river gravel beds include, in significant quantities, pieces of petrified wood that have been mechanically weathered to the point where they are indistinguishable from cobbles by casual observation. This has been documented by researchers who have done systematic mineralogical analysis of river gravel in regions with known ancient forest cover. The distribution of these petrified fragments is consistent with a source event that involved water transport of enormous energy over a relatively short period. Not the gradual transport of a river system operating over millions of years, which tends to produce far more sorting and size reduction than the observed specimens show, but the rapid transport of a flood event of continental scale, which can carry and deposit large organic material with the pattern of mechanical damage and directional sorting that the petrified wood deposits display. The forests that produced this material were larger, denser, and more widely distributed than anything existing on Earth today. The trees were bigger. The canopy coverage was more extensive, and the event that destroyed them was of a scale that has no modern analogue, which is precisely why the uniformitarian framework struggles to account for it. What that event was is a matter of active research and active debate. The candidates include massive volcanic episodes associated with known large igneous provinces. They include bolide impacts of the scale that have left documented craters in the geological record. They include rapid climate shifts associated with astronomical cycles that operate on timescales of tens of thousands of years. And they include combinations of these factors operating in close temporal sequence, producing a cascade of environmental disruption that transformed the surface of the Earth over a period of centuries rather than millions of years. The revisionist economic history connection is this. The institutions that control natural history knowledge have economic structures that reward consensus maintenance and punish paradigm challenge. A geologist who publishes catastrophist interpretations does not lose their data. They lose their funding, their publication access, and their professional standing. This is not conspiracy. This is institutional economics. The same dynamics that eliminated the independent hardware store operate in academic institutions. Local knowledge, careful observation by individual researchers, unconstrained by institutional frameworks, is the expertise the academic system has been eliminating for 150 years. The smooth stones in the riverbed are not lying to you. They are telling you something that took a long time to say, something said in the language of mineral replacement and sedimentary transport and mechanical weathering that requires patience and attention to read. What they are saying is that before the event that buried them, the world had forests we cannot imagine from what remains today. Trees of dimensions that modern ecology considers impossible. Canopies so dense and extensive that the carbon they contained, when it was suddenly removed from the living cycle and buried, altered the chemistry of the atmosphere. They are saying that something ended, something large and old and deeply rooted in the biology of this planet, ended in an event that the geological record preserves in every riverbed and gravel pit and exposed formation on every continent. And they are saying that the story we have been told about when this happened and how and why the world we live in looks so different from the world those trees grew in is a story that was assembled by institutions with interests in a particular version of the timeline. The riverbed is a library. The petrified logs are the books. Each one is a record of a tree that grew, fell, was carried by water, moving faster than any river running today, was buried under material deposited in a time frame that uniformitarian geology finds uncomfortable to specify, and was then slowly replaced atom by atom with mineral until it became indistinguishable from the riverbed surrounding it. Most of the people who walk past them every day mistake them for rocks. They were told to. And that is what is sitting in your riverbed, not random geology. The transformed remnants of a forest so large that its destruction altered the planet, preserved by mineral replacement, carried by floodwaters of a scale the uniformitarian framework prefers not to name, and mistaken for ordinary stones by everyone who was never told to look differently. The evidence was always there. The question was always who controlled the explanation. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.